Welcome to the D2 Baseball Podcast, your top source for all things D2 Baseball. Before we jump into today's episode, I've got some exciting news. Are you looking to reach a passionate, engaged audience? We're now offering ad spots on our podcast. By advertising with us, you'll connect with thousands of dedicated D2 baseball fans, including players, coaches, and avid supporters. Here's why you should consider partnering with us. Targeted reach. Engage a specific audience that loves D2 baseball. High engagement. Our listeners are loyal and tuned in regularly. Affordable rates. Competitive pricing for all budgets. Flexible formats. Choose from pre-roll, mid-roll, or post-roll ads. Interested? Email us at diviibaseball@gmail.com to learn more and secure your spot. Let's hit it out of the park together. Thanks for considering this opportunity. Now, let's get to today's episode of the D2 Baseball Podcast. Welcome into the Division II Baseball Podcast, and we're talking about Division II baseball players who made it to the professional ranks and, well, had their name called in this summer's MLB draft. It's going to be a lot of fun today to detail past or present D2 players that had their name called this year in the 2024 MLB draft, and some other guys who got signed as well. It's going to be fun to talk about D2 baseball players making it to the next level. And we're alongside Robert Fry. I'm Will Connerly. We're happy to be with you. Robert, it's going to be fun. Let's set the scene here a little bit, the Division II baseball environment. Obviously something we both cover and know really well, and we know that it's a very coveted list to be selected in the draft as a Division II player. Small percentage of the guys get this honor, so it's going to be fun to talk about these special athletes here today.
Absolutely. Well, we have 25 total names that have been called in that MLB draft that happened roughly, a month ago. And of those 25, 13 played at a D2 last year. So the remaining 12 were previously at a Division II before maybe transferring to a Division I or transferring to another school of that look. But as we kind of, scroll down, and if you're seeing this on the video side of it, the Padres have taken the most D2 players from 2024, meaning of the 13 that were taken, the Padres took 3, which was more than anyone else. And we'll talk a little bit more about those 3 players that were taken by the Padres. The Braves took 2. It's the only other team that took more than one Division II player from 2024. While the Athletics, the Mariners, the Marlins, the Mets, Orioles, Rangers, Red Sox, and Tigers each took 1 player that were presently at a Division II. But 25 total players, and we'll break down every single player, especially that we reached a new height that a former Division II player was actually a top 10 overall pick. Mm-hmm. And we're excited to talk about that as well. And, those who may not know of those kind of guys that maybe played a Division II and then transferred to a Division I and then created opportunities for themselves, then get drafted. So without further ado, Will, let's go right into, say, every drafted player that come from D2, whether it was this past season or in years past.
Yeah, let's do it, Robert. So we'll start off with round 1, pick number 10 from the Nationals, Seaver King, who played at Wingate, but then he transferred to Wake Forest. And Robert, this wasn't too big of a surprise, was it, that he went so early upon transferring to Wake? I know that you pointed it out earlier in the offseason and going into last year, hey, we're going to have a guy go really high. And, well, that's what happened. Credit to him because he was certainly a special guy to watch at the Division II level, and he kept it up for the Demon Deacons as well.
Yeah, I mean, really special to watch, especially when you hit 399 and 15 home runs and 97 driven in your 2 seasons at Wingate, especially his 2023 season where he hit 411 with a 699 slug and an OPS almost at 1,200. And that made for a special season, especially a guy who can also play around the diamond there. So he played mostly shortstop at Wingate. When he transferred over to Wake Forest, he kind of spent more time in the diamond, which then boosted his stock because now that makes him a more of a dynamic player. And that's really exciting to see. Again, like, you don't see that here in Division II, where a player of that caliber gets drafted in the first 10 overall picks, but he made the most of his opportunities at Wingate and then decided, hey, I'm going to go transfer to Wake Forest, and played a year there, and now he's a top 10 overall pick. So we're excited to see what he does. And as of now, so as of this recording, he does not have any stats in the minor leagues, but that's kind of the narrative we will say for all of the players, as we haven't been able to find any stats of them in the minor league. So they're still, and a lot of it could be just because the wear and tear of playing in a college season, one, and then two, for pitchers, especially if you're a starter, if you've already thrown 100 plus innings, it's not uncommon to see those minor league orgs say, hey, or those organizations say, hey, like, you're shut down for the rest of the season, train and prepare and be ready for 2025 in that regard. So there was a bit of a space between, a past or present Division II player after Seaver, but hey, we got to the 5th round and we got another guy that I know you were a big fan of, Will, back in 2023, and then we talked a lot about him in 2023. And so why don't you get us started and talk about the next draft pick in the MLB draft that came from a Division II?
Oh, yeah. It's going to be another guy who I actually got to see play a little bit this year as well in person. Jacob Christian from San Diego, but played at Point Loma from 2022 to 2023. And certainly was a guy at Point Loma that I don't think I was alone in enjoying watching him swing the bat. Just had a little bit of a different sound come off his bat. Hit 364, had 41 bombs and 126 RBIs across 2 seasons. I mean, it was really impressive, and he capped it off with that really just historic 2023 season when he was pretty much, anybody you ask or any publication you look at, one of the best players of the country, and National Player of the Year awards came his way. So for Jacob Christian, this is pretty cool to go in the 5th round, pick 149 to the Giants. His bat, man, I mean, when you want to talk about what teams and what guys get noticed for, a lot of times at the first base position, you're graded on an even more difficult scale with the bat. And for him to be a 5th round pick from playing at the D2 level, he goes up to the D1 level. And that's the thing. You have to continue to perform and put up those numbers. So he continued to do that in 2024. But his ability to hit for average and power is something you look at from the first base spot. And I think that his power is super projectable because he's a big body. And I think that they know that they can get a little bit more out of him, but he can spray the ball to all fields, handles the bat really well. And man, I saw multiple balls come off his bat above 100 miles per hour when I saw him in person, just in a small little weekend set against Dallas Baptist. So I enjoyed watching him, Robert, and I think that you would probably have to agree a big reason why he stood out is he was one of the more dynamic bats in this draft for guys that had played Division II baseball at one point or another.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, when you think about it too, like the 28 home runs that he hit for Point Loma in 2023, and that field doesn't really, Carol B. Land Stadium doesn't really, with it being right on the water, you don't think that that's a hitter-friendly ballpark, but he definitely made a hitter-friendly ballpark. Then he transfers to a Division I, University of San Diego, so stays within the same city, let alone state, of transferring, and yet he still replicates that power, and he proves that he can still hit for that kind of power at the Division I level, and which ultimately led him to be a 5th round pick by the San Francisco Giants. So absolutely, he tore the cover off the ball multiple years and was a key cog for that Point Loma team in 2022 and 2023 with those stats. But man, that was an exciting pick. And as we continue on with exciting picks, we go to the first player that was a Division II player in 2024 and a guy with similar power to Jacob Christian, and that's Darian McDowell, Will.
It is, and he was a mammoth this year for West Florida. I mean, to go in the 6th round, 180th pick overall to the Padres, a team that we'll talk about a couple more times as well throughout this podcast. But Darian McDowell is a guy we need to talk about right now. First team All-American in our books, hit .442 with 27 home runs, had 77 driven in for West Florida. And Darian really elevated his performance when it mattered most. In the postseason, he was one of the best hitters across the country in the NCAA tournament and beyond. And so that was very, very impressive to see how he carried his team to a deep postseason run. But really, he was great all year long. His power, his OPS, his slugging, it was some of the best in the country. And he did it at first base, but he was a huge thumper. And I think that throughout the year of clipping highlights and looking at home runs, we obviously saw a lot of his, but the towering shot ability as well, high exit velocity and good launch on his balls, he can send the baseball a pretty far way. And that's, I mean, look at his frame. I mean, look at his size and look at his frame. You shouldn't be surprised, but he's really, I mean, he's pretty polished as a power hitter right now. I mean, 6'4", 220. I know he can continue to get better, but he is a really fun guy to watch, and he is a big physical bat that I think is going to have a nice professional career.
Yeah, you got that right. And what makes it really exciting is just the amount of talent that he put out, especially in the postseason when you're facing better teams. I mean, of his 27 home runs, he had 7 just coming from the conference tournament and the regional alone. 7 of those 27. That's typically when you're facing better competition. And yet here he goes off against better pitching, which is what you want to see. Because then once you get in the minor league level, you're only going to see better pitching going forward. But Darian McDowell was, that towering guy. Again, 6'4" frame, so that plays a part of it too. And potential D2 players getting drafted is that towering frame and just being able to hit for power like he did. Again, 442, 27 home runs, 77 driven in for a West Florida team that made a lot of noise, got to the regional final, ultimately bowed out to Embry-Riddle in that regional final. But in his 2 seasons with West Florida, man, he had 41 home runs and hit 400. And so there's nothing to scoff about for a guy that can really perform at a high level. And we're excited to see what he does continuing on to perform at a high level with the San Diego Padres. Again, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Padres here in a bit, but Darian McDowell, definitely a guy that we enjoyed watching throughout the season, and he made the most of his opportunities too in that season. I know we talked to the head coach of West Florida, Mike Jeffcoat, and just his impact, and especially, Will, if you remember, they moved him to the leadoff spot because Trent Jeffcoat was injured and unable to play, and in that game, he went, I believe he was walked 5 times in that game as the leadoff hitter. So either way, he's impacting the game, not just with his power, but just that power just makes opposing teams fear him and saying, "Hey, we're not gonna pitch to you. We're gonna make other guys feed us this season." So excited to see what he can do there for the San Diego Padres, and we may again have to wait until 2025 to see what he does so far. But there's no stats or information on him right now.
Yeah, and I'm sure that'll come as we progress. And really, the point of this podcast, I think the whole nother show could talk about what these guys could look like in the pros. But for this show, just to reiterate from off the top, we're talking about guys who play Division II baseball who got selected in the draft this year. We're highlighting their careers, looking at what stood out about from us to these guys. I mean, some of it's pretty clear when you look at their numbers, but recapping all the guys who got selected in Division II baseball, because it is a great honor. But I think it will also be something we do in the future. And as we continue to do, not just from 2024, but from years before, how Division II guys perform in the pros. I know you talked about it, and this is certainly a song for another time, about how many D2 guys have played in the majors. I know we've talked about that off the air, but stuff like that is stuff we like to continue to follow. But in this specific case, we're looking at the guys who got picked, and we have another one, a southpaw, first arm off the board in this regard. Round 8, pick 236 from the Detroit Tigers out of Regis University. It's Ethan Sloan, a back-end arm for them, and he put together a nice season, had some good stats. I didn't personally think, oh, this is a guy that's going to get drafted, but things start to make sense when you look at the way that he can cause some deception with his delivery. And man, he's been a closer the last couple of years. And, you know, when you're a back end guy that can come and get saves, certainly for a team that's turned around their fortune and made some big progress this year. They did it a lot at the back of the lefty Ethan Sloan. And to have a sub-4 in 19 games and get 9 saves, he certainly had some good stats, and he did have velo. I didn't realize that he brought it up as hard as he did from the left side, but certainly the velo from the left side, when he can touch 95, that'll get you noticed at any level.
You got that right, Will, and especially that lower arm slot that Sloan has. You know,
Yeah.
he has a pretty good job of deceiving those hitters. And like another thing to think about too is he had a 3.96 ERA in the RMAC, and typically you would see, you know, if you kind of checks and balance it out, that's roughly an ERA under 3 in a non-high altitude
Great point.
conference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it made for an impressive season, and the reason why, you know, Regis was able to get to the conference tournament championship against Colorado Mesa. The reason why Regis was able to make a regional. Big reason why was having Ethan Sloan in that back end. First year head coach Pat Jolly could go to his man and, you know, put the fire out, as he was used in multiple different roles, not just to get the save, but also to put fire out. You know, you can see, if you see that video there, it's the 4th inning. They're down 6-1 in the RMAC tournament. And here you go, bases loaded. You got Sloan in the game, knowing that you could still get yourself back in the game. Again, in the RMAC, you know, being down 5 is really being down 2. So having a guy like Sloan was just crucial, and we'll be excited to see how the Tigers develop him and what to see going forward with Sloan. You know, having that arm deception, having that velocity, who knows? He could be a contributor there in the big league level if he can continue his success, what he did this past season with Regis.
I agree. And you bring up such a great point, too, about the RMAC ERAs, because I remember we talked to Chris Hanks about that when we interviewed him, and he just straight up, he said, you know, you got to shave a couple of points off, just like you brought up. And he said, hey, other leagues are in the inverse of that. They may have really low ERAs, and those are inflated, so to speak, in a good way as well. So that's an incredible point that you bring up, and something that I probably overlooked, because you look at, sub-4 and good stats, good numbers, lefty throws hard, but man, sub-4 in the RMAC, you don't see that. You know, you don't see that a lot. So that is a really good point as we continue to talk about guys who ended up having success this past year. Robert, another selection. We stay on the arm front, round 8 to pick 251. Logan Samuels, a right-handed pitcher out of Montevideo, this past season for the Falcons. In about 60 innings, struck out 69 guys, only walked 15, and he struck out 190 through 180 career innings. So somebody who can throw hard as well. His fastball can get up to 94 about, and another dynamic arm that you're going to get this time from the right side that certainly is known to get a lot of strikeouts, and that's what big league clubs are looking for, and that's what the Braves are hoping for here with Samuels.
Yeah, absolutely, what they're hoping for. And I mean, he's got a pretty good slider to go with it. I know he was, at least games that were tracked in terms of using like technology like Synergy, TrackMan, so on and so forth. You know, he had a nearly 40% whiff rate on a slider, which plays pretty well. You know, and typically you'll see like he did, he had an ERA in the 5.5s, but he was able to throw the ball well, throw the ball effectively. Being able to strike out guys again, 190 in 180 innings. So there was something that the Braves saw in Logan Samuels and said, hey, like we should make him a draft pick. And again, this is another guy that's a senior. So it's not uncommon at the MLB level for teams, with the bonus pool era where you only allowed a certain amount of money for each pick, but you can use the money you saved for those first 10 rounds to spend more on maybe a first rounder or a second rounder. You can use that. So typically what you'll see is you'll have these guys, senior signs, what we'll call them, they'll sign for 10,000, 20,000. Sure, that's not a lot, but
$1,000.
The way they look at it, 1,000. So that was actually, yeah. And so, like, real quick, we'll talk about that. In 2022, Quincy left-handed pitcher starter Riley Martin was signed by the Cubs in the 6th round. He signed for $1,000. And because of that, now they made a rule where the minimum you have to give someone is now $10,000.
Yeah, 21 he was drafted, yeah.
21, yeah. Sorry, 21 he was drafted. Thank you, Bill.
They made that rule because of him?
That was part of it, yes.
Wow, I knew that happened, then that rule came. Makes sense.
So the minimum you can give is $10,000 now. So no more $1,000. So that's a nice piece of trivia for you D2 baseball fans. But going on to that now, that's what you'll typically see. So the Braves thought they saw something in Samuels, and with that slider, the Braves are pretty good at developing guys with good breaking balls. So they saw something in that, and they said, "Hey, would you sign for $10,000 at this round?" And more than likely, a player will say yes for a chance to play professionally. So excited for Samuels. He was a key part. He wasn't really like their closer, but he was the guy the high leverage guy that came in the back end and came in, put out the fire before going to the end of the bullpen. So Montevallo got his draft pick, and it was Logan Samuels. So we're excited to see that. We're excited to see how he performs there. And again, this might be another case where he might be doing like instructs. So that's another thing I failed to mention was they might be at just instructs, so like at the complex where they're just doing like, the fundamentals, things like that, maybe doing scrimmages, but none of that data or stats are being tracked there.
Mm-hmm.
So you might see that, but a lot of guys, again, who threw a lot of innings may not throw it all here coming up. So we're excited to see what Logan Samuels can do for the Atlanta Braves, is, being able to translate very far going from Alabama to Georgia. It's pretty regionalized there, especially. So as we go on now, the Braves, then let me double check that. I don't think, okay, so this is an error. I know it says Atlanta Braves, but the 9th round pick that will start to talk about, Derek Clark out of West Virginia, that was actually the Angels and not the Braves.
Yeah, and the Angels, what is it, the 2nd consecutive year they've drafted a pitcher who had at least played some time in the Division II ranks? Derek Clark, though, lefty. He was at West Virginia, but he previously played at Northwood from 2021 to 2023. So 3 years at Northwood, and he went 23-7 in 264 innings, ate up a ton of them, and with a 3.38 ERA, he struck out 259 while walking just 74 batters. How he didn't get drafted just out of Northwood alone, I don't know. But then he went to West Virginia, fielded his position at a high level, and really just is somebody who he has that bulldogged effort. He has that reputation. He's thrown a lot of innings. He has experience. He's pretty polished, but then he continued to prove it at the Division I level for West Virginia. And so the Angels in the 9th round, that's the direction that they go with pick 262, getting Derek Clark.
Yeah, and Boy, do we have some experience seeing him. I know in my experience, coaching, I was able to see postseason Derek Clark for 3 straight years, and that's pretty nice to see. And he was very exciting. So go all the way back to 2021 pitching for Northwood. He started a game, then I guess it got delayed with rain, so he didn't really finish it. But then the very next day, he came in relief and closed out a game back in 2021 for Northwood. And so did well there. He also threw well in 2022 in that regional with Davenport and Quincy. And then in 2023, another regional, this time at Quincy with Quincy and Wayne State. I mean, he was a different beast. He was again a guy that's a bulldog that can get you innings out on that mound, and he will perform to the highest of levels that he can with his left-handed side and being able to succeed there, in the Big 12 at West Virginia, and being able to succeed for at least most of the game in that super regional against North Carolina is a huge, huge indicator of success. And I'm glad, because recently they moved the draft back another month. So at this point, a couple years ago, we wouldn't have been able we wouldn't have known if he was drafted or not, Derek Clark. Now he likely would have been drafted, but we wouldn't have been able to see that performance and say, hey, his stock might be rising because the draft already happened, way back in the
it happened.
regionals.
Yeah, it happened like the week of super regionals, right? Like
it depends. So like
depended.
sometimes it'd be the week of super regional, sometimes it'd be the week of regionals. It depends on how the
way better that it's later now though, because kids
Yeah.
can also go prove themselves in summer leagues too to rise their
100%.
stock, or unfortunately sometimes their stock gets lowered, right? But I think it's much better to have it later. You get more of a sample size. I don't know how much the stock moves, right, from postseason performances, but I definitely think it plays a role, and it definitely is good information to have to see how guys are performing there or in summer leagues as well, that they could face some other competition or work on some things that the scouts want them to work on. And speaking of working on things, how about a kid who had a couple different stops? We actually stopped and chatted with him as well. Zach Evans from the San Diego Padres. He got selected in the 9th round from Lenore-Rhine, and good for Zach Evans. He was a lot of fun to talk to. Very humble, hardworking man, and I enjoyed every second we got to talk with him because his story's pretty cool, but I think his leadership is just so evident. The way he talked, the way he said, hey, I want to work on every single aspect of my game every single day, and I'm always in here for the grind. And as soon as he came to Lenore-Rhine, that's really what he did, and he put together a great career. He was so competitive, one of the tougher kids to strike out in the entire country, and he also hit for pretty good average as well, 321 mark in a very tough area of the country where a lot of good arms are. He performed at a high level with the bat. And so Zach Evans, premier defender as well, at the shortstop spot, a premier position, goes to the 9th round to the Padres.
Yeah, and I know we enjoyed talking with him a lot. And I know you asked Will about, what did you work on once you went to Lenore-Rhine? And the biggest thing was like defense, right? And he wanted to improve his defense. He improved his defense. And, the Padres saw that and they said, hey, it's very common in, pro baseball to see guys with a quote unquote projectable body, meaning like they still have some room to fill out in terms of strength and muscle. And so Zach Evans, being the height that he is, around 6'3", or no, 6'4", excuse me, shorted him an inch, but 6'4" as a shortstop, being able to have that and work on your defense, that creates opportunities to not just play at shortstop, but play across the diamond as well. And so the Padres definitely saw that, and they saw how he was able to work. And again, like character. And what I really loved about talking with Zach too is, all it takes is one person to see you and then believe in you. And that's all it took. One person in the Padres or saw Zach Evans, was like, hey, we think he's going to be a really good player. So let's take a chance on him. And here we go. Now he's in the fall in Arizona, the furthest out west he's ever been. And we're excited for him. And we can't wait to see what he can do there with the San Diego Padres org.
It is going to be a lot of fun to see. And another guy, as we continue to talk about fun, man, really excited to see a guy in Jacob Krager go from Maryville. The left-handed pitcher got picked in the 10th round by the Atlanta Braves, and they got one of the best left-handed arms in this draft out of the D2 ranks. Certainly just overall, one of the best stuff guys in terms of the strikeout numbers. He struck out over 300 batters in his career. And he was a guy that, when you look at his career at Maryville, he just continued to get better and better and better and better. And so a good credit to the Saints program and to him for continuing to get that development and developing into a top 10 rounder. And a guy, a lefty, who can run it up there with some good velo, command control. He has a lot of the things you like, and I'm excited to see what the Braves do with him. Ultimately, are they going to try to make him a guy that gets a little bit more velo and is a later inning reliever? Do they try to keep him in the starter role? That's going to be interesting and maybe a song for another time. But shout out to Jacob Krager for being selected. He's going to a great organization, and he was a lot of fun to watch. I saw him quite a bit in my career covering Division II baseball and just being when I was at Quincy. So really happy for him and seeing a guy from that program go school.
Absolutely happy for him as well. I know he started his career as a reliever there at Maryville, and then Pat Evers head coach of Maryville said, hey, we think he's going to be a starter, and it really panned out pretty well in his 3 years as a starter, starting in 2022. Being able to have those high strikeout numbers. I mean, he went from 65 innings, 90 strikeouts in 2022, 64 innings and 77 strikeouts in 2023 to then 2024, 90 and 2/3 innings, 117 strikeouts. Being able to just build that up and work on that. And then again, what we talked about earlier with Logan Samuels with the Braves. Krager does have a really good breaking ball. So the Braves are really good at developing that, or they recognize, the potential in that, and then being able to use that to their advantage as, Krager could hopefully progress through the ranks of the minor leagues. But yeah, again, a guy who can go out there, get after it each outing, performs very well, pitched very well in the GLVC, and a guy that you should definitely keep your eye on as in future years as the minor leagues, continue to progress and see, just how far can he go.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a fun story to continue to follow. Another arm going, this time from the right side, a guy who has just had a great career. When you think about Division II baseball and we talk about the program of Northwood, they have a couple of arms drafted in this draft. We already talked about Derek Clark, who was selected in the 9th round by the Angels. Now you get Jake Jaiklak, a standout reliever. He was, 4 years at Northwood. He was great. He goes to the reigning world champs in the Texas Rangers, and he does it in the 10th round. And this was a guy who just was a pretty consistent staple in the back end of their pen, has a pretty awkward arm angle, which helps him out. And he was a part of a Northwood team that really, they were always pretty good. So he pitched in a lot of high leverage situations. This year they made the NCAA tournament for the 7th consecutive year. He was a part of a lot of those teams. And he has some good velo, especially considering where he throws the ball from. A little bit of that sidewinder.
Yeah, and especially this past season, holy cow. Jaiklak only walked 5 batters and struck out 56 in 42 innings. A guy who, over his career, had 116 strikeouts of 38 walks in 105 innings. So being able to, from that delivery, being able to get outs the way that he did, kind of I want to say call it like a reverse 3/4. So not full submarine, not full sidearm, but a little bit of in between there. Being able to do that and throw 90 miles an hour from that delivery, the Rangers are no scoff to that before, having submariners in the past, being able to pitch for them. So maybe they saw something on it and think, hey, this is a great opportunity for us to take a guy out of Northwood, Jake Jekelic, who again
Jekelic, excuse me.
performed very well for Northwood. As you know, in his first 2 years, they were members of the GLIAC, and then they switched over to GMAC in 2023. But still, nonetheless, he still performed at such a high level. Again, that .93 whip is just impressive this past season. He threw in just about every high leverage situation. He and, the battle of the Jakes, he and Jake Carroll for Northwood, two guys that threw a lot of relief innings for Northwood, and a big reason why they got as far as they did this past season.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, excuse me, Robert Jekelic. I don't know. I butchered that pretty bad last, but no, shout out to him. And the Texas Rangers certainly going to do some good things with him. Now we continue to talk about guys picked, and it's going to be another guy who is a pitcher from the right side, the Chicago White Sox, who are on track to have the number 1 pick in 2025. But
actually, they are not,
no.
because the new incentive is if you had a top 10 pick last year, you can't get it again. So they can at best
can't get it again.
No, they can at best get I think
11?
number 10.
Oh my gosh. That new one, because they have the lottery during the winter meetings. I thought the lotto would favor them. Man, dang, we got more to talk about when that comes around. But, well, this is a team in the 11th round. They pick Blake Shepherdson, a right-handed pitcher from California. But he played at Regis from 2022 to 2023. And there he struck out 73 batters in 79 2/3 innings. He's a big guy, and he has a nice sinker, mid-90s as well. He's got some good break on a slider, changeup as well. So we'll see what they can do. He's a back-end type of guy, you would think, but former Regis arm getting selected. So that's another program that's produced some good pitching talent. You saw it with 2 arms selected in the top 11 rounds of this year's draft from that school.
Yeah, and I know Shepherdson, being at Regis, the ERAs are not favorable. San Francisco, it wasn't favorable to him. But again, with all those metrics measured and being 6'5", 220, again, a projectable body, teams like seeing that. They think, hey, maybe we can take a chance on this guy and see some opportunity there in the 11th round, especially, with the draft being pushed back the way it is. Was able to prove himself at the MLB draft league with West Virginia, as he threw 5 1/3 scoreless innings and struck out 11 and walked just 2 batters this past summer in his short outings there, maybe to help boost him and then maybe get closer on the White Sox radar there. But again, like a guy that, again, projectable frame plays an important role, because in his college career, hate to admit it, but his career ERA was 8.7. Not great, but again, the projectable body, being able to throw hard, and different metrics like that, the lake break slider, as mentioned there, changeup as well, helps him. And having that 6'5" frame, thinks, okay, maybe the White Sox can say, okay, maybe, this is a guy that can really perform at a high level here in the future.
And that's what you're doing in these picks too. You're projecting. I mean, there's certain guys with much better stats that there's so many guys with great stats that didn't get drafted. Like, it's not really about your stats. It's not at all. I mean, they don't hurt, but it really, there's so many examples of guys who were on our All-American list that are some of the best numbers. And some of those guys get picked, but some don't. And there's just reasons for that. And some of the reasons is just what you talked about, the projectability. And it's hard to put, I mean, there's stats on that, right? How projectable is he? And analytic departments go through that, but it's maybe not necessarily something you're going to see on a box score or a cumulative stat sheet page on a baseball.com reference or something. So, but here's a guy who had a lot of stats, as we talk about next. And I think actually his stats probably really helped him, along with his ability to do a lot with the bat. And that's Sean Barnett, Robert, outfielder from Wingate. He had 26 home runs this year. He hit 349. So the good power and average combination. He had above 1,000 OPS in his career at Wingate, and he really checks all the boxes for you as a hitter. Can go to all fields, obviously, with the way his average is up there. Not a lot of complaints. I'm really high on Sean Barnett. I think he is a very high level bat.
Oh yeah, and even the University of Missouri, an SEC school, thought he was a high level bat as he was committed there before getting drafted. So it's not uncommon to see that as well. A couple of years ago, we saw something similar with Mason Green, who went undefeated for Central Missouri, ultimately get drafted. He transferred to from Central Missouri to Missouri, but never got to play there since he was drafted. But seeing that, that opportunity there, and I want to go into his game logs. I know he had a period where he just kept hitting home run after home run after home run.
A Darian McDowell stretch, he had one of those.
Yeah, so similar, postseason wise, conference tournament, in a 7-game stretch, he had 8 home runs in the 7-game stretch, and that's in the conference tournament. Starting with Carson Newman, beat Coker and extras. He homered there. Then they had the best 2 of 3 against Newberry. They won both. He homered in each of those games. Then he homered twice against Lincoln Memorial, homered once against them when they played him again, and then homered against Mount Olive. So in that 7-game span, he had 8 home runs. And again, this is postseason against quality pitching. So wow, just very impressive to see that.
Mm-hmm.
He played center field for him, really good in the outfield as well. And he helped quite a bit with Jeff Gregory's team and being able to be as successful as he was, with him and Brett Adams in the middle of that order, made it really tough outs for opposing teams against Wingate.
He had 11 home runs in his last 12 games, too.
I mean, yeah.
He finished the year extremely strong, just kind of expanding on, that's interesting, though. He finished with 26, but basically heading into the final month, I mean, that's when he had 11 in the last 12 games with the multi-home run game in there, of course, but still 11 in your last 12. He finished the year hot, and can he carry that into the professional ranks? That'll be fun to follow. Obviously, he is a guy who can get hot, has the power, plays good defense. Lot to like about him, but he doesn't rely on the home run either. He has gap-to-gap power and hits high for high average also. So that'll be interesting to see. Yeah, good pull on that. I mean, he was committed to playing the SEC. A lot of guys do that for the leverage, like you mentioned, but still, congrats to him.
Yeah, and I mean, a guy that could definitely play. And like the last thing I'll say with the Padres, that's the 3 guys that they drafted. And, that's a really fun team to have. Zach Evans, Darian McDowell, and Sean Barnett all potentially probably going to play on the same team here coming up, whether it be the end of this season or the beginning of next season in what's likely rookie ball or low A, one of those two. I'm really excited to see all those 3 because those are the 3 Padres teams. But another Padres, or no, excuse me, a Mets draft. So again, Padres listed here, but Mets listed here. Go with this one. Is Ethan Lanthier, who was a former St. Cloud State Husky in 2022 and 2023, transferred over to Kansas. And Will, what are your thoughts here?
He's a big body. I mean, that's one of the things you talk about when you're trying to project the guy. Played at St. Cloud State and had some good years there. And after he transferred there, he goes to Kansas, and he has a good presence on the mound. At a bigger stage, of course, playing in the Big 12, you're going to play good teams like Texas. Nothing against the NSIC. It just is what it is. But, I mean, after transferring, he had a good job. We ended up doing some nice things out of the bullpen. 6'5", 230. There's a lot to like out of the big right arm of him. And at St. Cloud State, he had some pretty impressive numbers. So I think that his command and control is pretty unique to have at his size. It's a lot harder for bigger, younger guys to control their pitches as much because of the fact that there's more moving parts, more margin for error because you're a bigger guy. But now the fact that he has that control, I think that is exciting for the Mets to be able to maybe add and polish some of his game more to try to develop into a reliever that they can rely on maybe in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, 134 strikeouts and 106 and third innings in all of his career in 4-year colleges. Being a big part of that St. Cloud State team that won the NSIC tournament in 2023. He was a key cog in that, having a great start plus some relief appearances there to be able to win that is huge as well. So excited for him and excited for the Mets as we will continue to trek on and talk about a guy who actually had a pretty interesting career arc and someone who you wouldn't think would be a draft, but here we are. The Oakland Athletics think, hey, Ryan Magdick was a guy who you should go after. And the reason why we think that is because, well, when he played at Florida Southern in 2023, Ryan was a draft out of Missouri. He had 100 plate appearances. He played mostly first base, and he threw just 1 inning. He enters the portal, and Missouri sees him as, hey, we think you can pitch, and essentially becomes a full-time pitcher at Missouri, performs very well there, and performs well enough to think, hey, the Athletics think, hey, we should probably draft him as, in his career at Florida Southern. Like prior to this, he threw 3 innings in a summer league, and then after he left Florida Southern, he threw 18 innings at another summer league, and then he goes to Missouri, throws 35 innings, strikes out 37, walks just 11. So think about it that way as well.
Yeah. I mean, he that is a very interesting. Career arcs in baseball are so much fun because there's so many different paths people can take. And this is another example of how there's not a clear path to get drafted, to get to the show. There's so many different ways to do it. And that is, I mean, credit to Mizzou as well for seeing that, right? For seeing that, hey, he's a guy who we can develop, and the lefty's the first Mizzou player to go as well in this draft, along with being selected and formerly playing at Missouri Southern. That's interesting, but it's a credit to his talent and to his ability. And speaking of left-handers, Robert, we had another one go as well right after this in the 15th round. And this is a guy who I really enjoyed watching. I got to see him in person this year playing for Louisiana Tech, a righty, Sam Broderson, who gets selected by the Cardinals. And this guy has some strikeout stuff. He really does. I mean, I know that he's got some wicked stuff. I mean, he's basically a guy I think you could see comes out of the back end of the bullpen, and it's I don't even remember. It's mid-90s for sure. It's firm velo. You see the tweet right there. Yep, mid-90s fastball slider. But it's crazy because he misses a lot of bats. Yeah, 40% K percentage this season, which was an increase from what he did at Wingate when he pitched at 121 career innings for the Bulldogs, went 10-3 with a 3.63. So he was great and even got better as he continued in the Cardinals. I think are getting a really good righty.
Yeah, they definitely are. And holy cow, like go all the way back to 2021 when Wingate won the national championship. You know who was a big contributor in that bullpen?
Young
Sam
man.
Broderson.
Yeah.
And not only that, he was a freshman with him too. So think about that as well, being able to perform not just at a high level, but being able to perform the way that he did just by being a true freshman.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think about. And again, a guy that was just a key cog for Wingate for multiple years, and a guy that really got a lot done with Wingate. In 2023, kind of was a swingman, a little bit of start, a little bit of relief, but then he goes to Louisiana Tech for his final year. pitches exclusively out of bullpen and strikes out 96 guys in 56 innings with Louisiana Tech. And
Crazy.
that's just, something beyond impressive and not something that you should take lightly there. So, but another thing with Broderson is, in that game against Central Missouri, that national championship game, think about this. We know how good Central Missouri's offense has been year in and year out. Well, in that national title game, he did not allow a single hit in 5 scoreless innings in that title game. And so that was a big part
Out of the pen?
Out of the pen.
Yeah.
So beyond impressive from Broderson being able to do what he did there. But man, I mean, that was beyond fantastic. Or excuse me, no, that was out of the bullpen in that 5-3 win to clinch the national championship. But we have a lot of fond memories here with Sam Broderson and Wingate, especially that national championship winning season. Being able to come out of the bullpen, he made, just in the World Series alone, he made 4 appearances. And that last one being a 5-inning no-hit performance against Central Missouri makes it even more impressive as a true freshman, nonetheless, being able to do that. So we're excited. We're elated to see what Sam Broderson can do in the Cardinals org.
Yeah, I'm pumped up about it for sure. Next guy, round 15, pick 443. We're talking about the New York Mets, and we're talking about a kid named Owen Woodward. He played this past season at Houston, but before that, he was in Lubbock, Texas, playing for Lubbock Christian. Did that in 2021. So 15th round pick. He struck out 51 batters in 50 innings in 21 with the Chaps. This past year, he had 10 appearances, did get 1 start, and 23 and a third for Houston. So talk about career arc, a little bit interesting because you get Lubbock in 2021, then Houston this past year. And that's another selection, a guy who formerly played at the Division II level in the Lone Star Conference. So Owen Woodward goes, the right-hander, to New York.
Yeah, and Owen Woodward now has a bit of a notoriety to him, unfortunately, as he went from Lubbock Christian, transferred to a junior college, Weatherford College, before playing his last 2 seasons at Houston. But he was the guy that was known to, at Weatherford College, he gave up a home run, and as the kid was rounding third, he tackled the kid at third base before he could score, and that led to a big fight. I know that was part of the talk, but unfortunately, we make note of that, and that's kind of his notoriety. But going back to his time at Lubbock Christian, 15 appearances, 6 starts, 15 and a third. He had 51 strikeouts and 26 walks. And then this past season at Houston, 36 strikeouts to just 4 walks and 23 and a third innings. So excited to see what happens there in the Mets organization.
Yeah, I just have to follow up on that video because that thing was viral. That was wild. And that was like a good hit too. I'm surprised he didn't get looked at, linebacker wise, but
yeah,
that
potential linebacker.
That's, if you haven't seen that video, it would be easy to look it up. So round 15, Minnesota Twins. They go for a right-hander out of Campbell, Robert Cole Peschel.
Cole Peschel.
He played at Charleston, West Virginia from 22 and 23. And 2 seasons there, he's pretty good. I mean, 11-4, had a sub-3, struck out a ton of guys over 100 in less than 80 innings. And so he's the 458th overall pick to the Minnesota Twins out of Campbell. But again, played a couple of seasons for Charleston where he was really good. And that's what ultimately got our attention to know, hey, this is a good ball player, continue to prove it. That's the thing I want to just continue to reiterate. A ton of guys this year transferred from D2 to D1, but the guys that continue to prove it are the guys that will be talked about in the draft. And, well, Peschel's another guy like that. Peschel.
Yeah, so the thing with Cole Peschel is, with Charleston, he was mostly a reliever. He's had some starting experience at the end of the 2023 season, 18 appearances, 5 starts. He had a 2.35 ERA in 2023. But, man, a guy who has a really low strike or a really high strikeout to walk ratio, 78 strikeouts to 14 walks in 2023 with Charleston. He transfers to Campbell, and he becomes a starter. All of his appearances are starts. And in 69 innings, he struck out 83 to just 19 walks. So that's a strikeout to walk ratio over 4. And that's really good, at any level, being able to have that high of a strikeout to walk ratio. So a guy that kind of, again, the path is, Charleston, hey, we're going to use you as a reliever your first two years here. And then, hey, maybe we should let him start. So at the end of the year, they let him start, pitch more crucial games. And again, end of the year, you're facing against better competition, whether it be the conference tournament or the regionals. Charleston, a team that consistently makes the regionals and represents the MEC in the conference tournament very well, goes to Campbell and becomes a full-fledged starter for then head coach Justin Hare, who's now at Ohio State. But a guy that can really get it done, and again, just proved it there. 11-4 with a 2.96 ERA, now 107 strikeouts and 79 1/3 innings with Charleston in those 2 years.
Yes, and as we talk about drafting, and we're going to continue on the arm train, because a lot of guys from the Division II level that either played it or had played it this past season, well, a lot of them is going to be arms. Those are the guys who get noticed, and you get noticed from a kid out of the Midwest region. Wayne State being represented as Griffin Kylander, got selected by the Red Sox in the 16th round, a man that we enjoyed talking to earlier this year. He had a really fantastic season, had a couple of gems that he put together on a pretty good Wayne State pitching staff. But the thing for me, man, 136 punchies to only 43 walks. He had good combination of dominant stuff, but also command. And so that was for his career. His fastball can get up there. 94 miles per hour is his top. And he had a really good season. And I think the thing for him as well, and I think the Red Sox saw this, he's a kind of a lean, lengthy type guy. It feels like you could fill him out a little bit, kind of like they did. Now, this guy was way more coveted, but you know how Tanner Houck has continued to blossom after being an early pick. He's a long, lengthy type of guy. That's what Kylander is, and I think if you add a little bit to his mechanics and delivery in terms of some of the strength that he can put behind that 94 could turn into 96. And that velo increases, he could be a guy that the Red Sox, and you could see him be in the back end because he's a lengthy guy with those long limbs.
Absolutely. A guy that's 6'5", under 200 pounds that's listed. Again, a guy that still has room to grow, adding maybe if you make him like 6'5", 215, you add about 20 pounds of muscle. You turn all that into muscle. Yeah, like you said, that 94 becomes 96. And nonetheless,
that's what Houck was. Houck was like 6'5". Now he's like 230, but I don't think he was that coming out.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe they saw that similar thing with Kylander, and they took a chance on him as, in his 3 years at Wayne State, what he did, 34 appearances, 23 starts. He had 154 and 2/3 innings, 136 strikeouts, 43 walks, a whip of 1.3, and a 3.61 ERA. Really effective there. But yeah, maybe they just saw a similar path to what Tanner Houck did. But going to Wayne State, man, like just covering him and Carter Fitzpatrick the entire year was really exciting. A very good 1-2 punch. And we were very interested to see how this would play out. Who would be the one that would be picked, who would be a signee, maybe for an indie ball league or things along those lines. I know you and I talked about it. We had a feeling that maybe Carter Fitzpatrick, seeing him live in person, maybe had a chance to get drafted as well, like Griffin Kylander. But, ultimately it was Griffin Kylander who was drafted. Now Carter Fitzpatrick playing in the USPBL, the United Shores Professional Baseball League. So that is a pro baseball league playing there. But really very interesting to see how that played out. And, it was very exciting to talk about Griffin, in his start this past season against Purdue Northwest down in Florida, where he threw a near perfect game.
Yeah, he was a beast. I mean, he had some gems. That staff, when him and Fitzpatrick, I mean, we were on no hitter alert quite a bit with both those guys. So that was cool. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it's probably dumb to compare the two because Hauk's an all-star and Hauk was a first rounder, but just the long lengthiness and Hauk used coming out of Collinsville, he was coveted, but Mizzou saw him as a long, lengthy guy that's a little leaner. And now coming out of college, that's harder, but still, can you add? And I know how hard it is to add too. Like everyone's like, oh, are they going to add? Like that's more for college. Like once you get it drafted, like, yeah, they draft a little bit on projectability, but they're not, you don't, and maybe later in the rounds, Robert, and you can speak to this, UDFA's more so, hey, he's a project, but it's not as much as like, okay, college, we're going to take this guy, develop him, get him in the weight room. Like, bro, it's hard to add a lot of weight when you're driving on a bus half the day, every single day, and you don't make a lot of money, so I get that. Like, these guys are grinding to go compete to get noticed, but I do think that they see things in guys. You know what I'm saying, Robert? I know I went way off script there, but that was just one of my thoughts.
No, I think that's a great point. Yeah. And I mean, using this time too is, hey, we're going to work on more things in the weight room. And maybe that could be it, especially with pitchers, they shut them down, but that doesn't mean they shut them down completely. And say,
Definitely.
hey, you're going to turn your focus to the weight room. Hey, maybe you're going to throw a little bit, but maybe it's on side sessions or things like that. You're going to just throw bullpens and then turn the focus to the weight room. Because yeah, the org probably saw it, like you mentioned, and we'll reiterate one more time. He has a similar frame to what Tanner Houck had there at Mizzou when he was drafted. So it remains to be seen whether or not Kylander will fill it out. But knowing that we talked to him and we believe him, we definitely believe in him, and we're happy to see him get drafted, and we're happy to see how far can he progress through the minor leagues.
Yes, and another guy that I got to see multiple times in person, and I know you did as well. 16th round, 481st pick. The New York Yankees, a team that's crushing it in the bigs right now, literally with a guy named Aaron Judge. But they get a lefty, Xavier Rivas, who pitched for Ole Miss this past year, but played a couple seasons at Indy and was a part of some good clubs there. But it was weird because the lefty, great pitcher, GLBC pitcher of the year, transfers. Then they make the World Series back-to-back years. But he goes in the 16th round, and 2 seasons at Indy, he was really good, especially in 22. You talk about that year he wins the conference's pitcher of the year award, goes 7-0 with a 2.24 ERA, with 128 strikeouts and only 31 walks in 80 innings. He had a ton of swing and miss stuff, goes to Ole Miss, gets noticed by the reigning champs at the time he transferred there, and gets into the rotation because they have quite a bit of injuries his first year there, and spends a couple years having some success in that regard. So good story there by the lefty Xavier Rivas, who I know we both have seen. The thing I liked is I think his changeup is his ticket. I mean, if he could continue to have that changeup fall off the table like he did on the arm side action run, has some good command of that fastball, I think he's going to have a nice career, because a lefty with a change, you could sign him for a good contract there. And I think that if he can continue to develop that, the New York Yankees have something special. I mean, you got to get that changeup down if you're going to ultimately play at Yankee Stadium. So we'll see.
Absolutely. And I know when we were covering him in 2022 in the conference tournament, he threw a no-hitter. I want to double check that, but I do believe he did throw a no-hitter in that conference tournament. I believe against Drury, though I'm not 100% sure. It might have been a one-hitter. Yeah, it was a one. It was a one-hitter, but he struck out 11, threw a complete game. Just impressive with his stuff, and like so at the time we had Flight Scope, so it was a tracking tech, and yeah, like you mentioned, his changeup had a ton of arm side movement. I think he had about 15 inches of arm side movement, if I remember correctly from that. And I know I personally was reached out to 2 years ago asking, hey, do you have any data on Xavier Rivas? And, he goes to Ole Miss, injuries enter, and he enters the rotation. And not only that, but going into the 2024 season, before he had an arm injury in the preseason, he was supposed to be Ole Miss's number one. He was supposed to be their Friday night guy, which
Yeah.
is absolutely crazy to think about. A guy from UIndy being able to have the success that he had just 2 short years later was supposed to be the number one guy for the defending national champion.
Yeah, SEC a team that won a champ a couple of years ago, and then to be an SEC arm Friday night guy. I mean, every Friday night arm in the SEC is on draft watch. So, his changeup was impressive. I remember another story about him. He threw a complete game shutout against Quincy, and that was one of the years. I mean, that Quincy's offense was just unreal, and this guy comes in, and I mean, he's landing everything. That was the thing. He was very polished because there are some guys that get drafted and they overpower you. And don't get me wrong, he has good stuff, but it was more like he was pitching, like he was landing that changeup. He was throwing it in 2-1 counts. He was commanding it any count, and then he was working with the fastball and the breaking ball there. But it sounded like, I mean, I don't remember exactly, Robert, his velocity, but when he was pitching at UIndy, I mean, he threw hard, but he wasn't throwing upper 90. He wasn't blowing it. Like you would think, though, by 128 strikeouts in 80 innings, that he would be mid to upper, but he was not mid to upper from what I remember.
He was low 90s. And the other stat I found interesting was, in his 2022 season at UIndy, he had 12 starts. 10 of those 12 starts, he struck out 10 or more batters.
Yeah.
So think about
that.
At
low nines. Yeah.
Yeah, low nines. Yeah.
So
I mean, again, low nines. But then again, if you think about it, low nines from the left side is, just equally, if not just as effective as mid nines from the right side.
100%. Plus, I mean, low nines, everybody could throw. A lot of guys throw low nines, but not a lot of guys get 128 strikeouts in 80 innings, which he did to get noticed by Ole Miss. And the reason why a lot of guys could throw low nines, not a lot of guys have his changeup. And that's the thing for lefties. Get that changeup, and you'll have your ticket. So that was his ticket for sure. Round 16, we go to another arm, another lefty from Kansas, played at Minnesota State in 2020 in that COVID-shortened season. Evan Shaw gets selected, and he's a guy who you want to talk about breaking balls and off-speed pitches. I know, Robert, he's known for his slider, and he gets picked in the 16th round by the Dodgers, a team that probably has one of the best player development systems in all of baseball.
Yeah, it does. And, what's crazy is he had quite a journey as well. He transfers to Cochise College, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong, a JUCO, after leaving Minnesota State, and then comes to Kansas and plays one season at Kansas this past season and performs very well as kind of a swingman, if you will. I know he performed very well in the Big 12 conference tournament in the opening start there. I believe they played against Kansas State, if I'm not mistaken. Performed well there, had 60 strikeouts and 42 and a third innings at Kansas. And yeah, he was a part of, the Minnesota State Mavericks there way back in 2020.
5 innings. Yeah.
For a shortened season. Hey, we're not going to miss a beat. If they came into 1 inning in Division II baseball, like go back to Ryan Magdick, if he just threw 1 inning at Florida Southern, he still counts because he made an impact in the game that he pitched in. So, hey, 5 1/3, he's still a Division II player some way, shape, or form. But
yeah, amen.
That makes it interesting there. And yeah, a guy that, another team that performs very well with breaking balls is the Dodgers, and we'll see how well they perform with that slider with Evan Shaw as one of his big pitches. I'm not sure on the numbers on his slider, but if you give me a second, I will be able to pull that up for you to get that information on what he did this past season in terms of maybe like whiff rate or things like that.
But I mean, to say the fastball slider option, to have that out of the bullpen, I think from the left side, every team of the bigs wants a guy out of the bullpen, probably 2 lefties out of your bullpen. One that can be a back end high leverage lefty, another that can maybe be a specialist, but both of them, you got to be that, you got to be that mid-nines if you're going to be in the show, but you have to have that fastball slider combination is typically what you're looking for. Okay, if you add in the changeup, you're like Xavier. We might make you a starter, but you only need 2 pitches as a lefty sometimes, and he certainly has that slider. And Robert, do you have the data geared up for us?
I do.
All right,
So,
let's hear it.
I want to say he's got a good changeup too. He only threw it 29 times though this past season for Kansas, but of the data that is found, he has a 43% whiff rate on the changeup and a 38% whiff rate on the slider. So makes it very interesting. Now, 16% whiff rate on the fastball, but it seems like he's throwing it more as a sinker type to induce ground balls. But he uses that slider to get that swing and miss. So
and that's what the Dodgers are known for. Like they're known for think about what Blake Trinan did with his slider when he got to the Dodgers. Think about what Walker Buehler did. I mean, I think that they have
recently Evan Phillips. Phillips was an unknown guy, and then goes to the Dodgers and
every Dodger,
an elite closer.
Yeah, every Dodger. You watch a Dodger game. Every Dodger has a dirty slider. I mean,
yeah, we can't wait to see once a healthy Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah, I mean that's sweet pieces. I think we got to look. I don't know if there's data on this, but teams with the best sliders. I don't know how you would. I mean, you could do your stuff plus whatever, but Dodgers got to be top there. They are nasty. Maybe we'll find.
I'm gonna say that's something you can look up on Fangraphs for sure.
Fangraphs.
They have a stuff plus metric.
All right, I'm on it now. Might as well just try to find it. All right. Stuff plus
pitch modeling.
You're gonna find it before me because I think you navigate this side at a high level. I typed in stuff plus by team, and the first thing that came up for me was Byron Buxton. Not that. Okay, stuff.
So this season, actually, the Dodgers are 12th in stuff plus slider. Interesting.
We're capping. Who's first?
The New York Yankees.
Huh.
I guess this is just this season. So
the Yankees do have Garrett Cole. I mean,
let's do the last 4 years. How about
give me a sample size. See if
actually the last 4 years. Okay, so the last 4 years it makes a little bit more sense. Houston's number 1. That makes sense. The Yankees are number 2. That makes sense. The Dodgers are number 3.
Okay.
3 really good plus on sliders in the last 4 years.
The 3 most major market, some of the best teams in baseball, each have the best sliders according to Fangraphs Stuff Plus over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay, that's something to think about. The Yankees up there, Garrett Cole,
and then if you take the other stuff metric, so the pitching bot stuff, which is a 20 to 80 scale, the Dodgers are tied for first.
So where did you find that? You go to the teams tab and go to Stuff Plus?
Go to leaders, pitching.
Okay, I see.
This season, and then pitching, team stats.
Dude, you can get lost in this website.
You sure can. Hopefully you can get lost in another website at some point.
Yes. You'll see in the show notes if you guys want to see this article. But yeah, Evan Shaw, good slider. That was
Evan Shaw, yeah. Well, now we're back to pitching, and now we're back to a guy who pitched in Division II and was really excited to cover this whole season. I know you talked a lot about him this past season. I talked a lot about him this past season. I thought, man, this guy's going to be really, really good. And turns out he was really, really good.
Yeah, and he has a good breaking ball as well. So if we're going to stay on that topic, Aiden Layton, drafted by the Oakland Athletics in the 17th round. He was an All-American for us. I mean, that was one of the surefire locks. I mean, he pitched at a really high level all year long, went 7-2, a 3.15 ERA, 88 innings. He got 90 strikeouts, but only 20 walks. And he had a ton of strikeouts in his career, 221 of them, and only 61 walks in his career. So he is a polished guy. He was giving Seton Hill 6 innings every time out. And he was he's a guy, he's just a pitcher. I mean, he's a bulldog. He's thrown a lot of innings in his career. He has a lot of traction, at least a lot of polishedness of what he brings to the table, and I think will only continue to grow.
Oh yeah, a guy that will only get better as time progresses on. Being able to pitch, for Coach Maz at Seton Hill for 4 years, he essentially becomes a starter halfway through, a full-fledged starter halfway through his second year in 2022, and then he just turns on the Jets the last 2 years. In 2023, he had 69 strikeouts, 16 walks, and 74 innings. And then in 2024, like you mentioned, 90 strikeouts, 20 walks, and 88 and 2/3 innings. Really good breaking ball. A guy that will go out there, in the PSAC, the PSAC, those 7-inning doubleheaders, you can pretty much pencil him in to cover most, if not all, of the game in his start in those doubleheaders. So, in one of those games, so you wouldn't really have to worry much about the bullpen. So, this is a great draft pick by the Athletics. And man, Aiden Layton, what's going to happen with him once he goes and is pitching in the minor leagues as well? We're going to be following that along closely, as we will follow along and go to the next pick as well.
Seattle Mariners with the 543rd pick, 543. Round 18, as I could say numbers correctly. Matt Tiberia? Is that how you say it? Tiberia. Okay. Kind of sounds like a country a little bit. He's a righty out of Lynn. He had a great year, 55 innings this past year, struck out 52 guys, pick number 543. And I think that this is a guy, these are the type of guys you see later on in this 20-round draft that you try to get a pick in and say, hey, let's look at what he could do with St. Rose in 2023. He struck out 25 in 13 innings. So the strikeouts have been there for him. The walks haven't. And 52 innings and just 11 walks, that's pretty good with a 4.55 ERA in one of the toughest conferences in Division II baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it makes another interesting story is he pitched at another Division II prior to 2024 and 2023 at St. Rose, which unfortunately they're now a defunct school as they shut down completely way back at the beginning, I believe at the beginning of June. So unfortunately they no longer exist. But playing at two different Division II schools, he was exclusively a reliever there, throwing 13 1/3 innings with 3 saves and 12 appearances, but then kind of mixed between relieving and starting at Lynn, going again to the best conference Division II baseball. 11 walks and 52 strikeouts is more than impressive there, with a strikeout to walk ratio close to 5 on that end. So it makes for an impressive strikeout to walk ratio there. And as well, what makes it really interesting, something you don't see very much, especially at the Division II level, is he was only a sophomore when he got drafted. That's that's very rare. Typically, you'll see at the Division II level, you'll see juniors or seniors get drafted, more so seniors. But he had still 2 more years of eligibility at the D2 level. But Tiberius said, hey, the time is now. And so did the Mariners think, hey, the time is now for Matt Tiberius. He only pitched, 1 season with Lynn and 1 season with St. Rose, but here he is now pitching in the Seattle Mariners org.
Yeah, the rare draft-eligible sophomore, when your path to get to the MLB draft and to get to those ranks for Division II players or players that don't know or people invested in the game. I mean, if you go to Division II, either you got to go 3 years. You have to go 3 years or be 21 years old at the time the draft comes, right, Robert? So those are your avenues to get drafted. If you transfer in, then there's our other rules. But at the end of the day, yeah, rarity that you see in that regard.
100%. And speaking of rarity, a guy who, man, really performed at such a high level for Felician. He was a big reason why they made that conference tournament there in the CACC, and a guy who, one, you could definitely pencil in and say, hey, he's going to strike out the board, and that's Mike Calden out of Felician, the right-hand pitcher, an 18th round pick by the Baltimore Orioles. Definitely a Baltimore Orioles type of pick with this guy.
232 strikeouts in 169 innings, man. He did a lot, and his strikeout numbers could not be ignored. Doing this for Felician, righty, 6-3 with 100 Ks this year in 75 innings. Had a great ERA as well. I mean, his numbers are pretty impressive. I think that a lot of teams took notice of him, and maybe a guy that you could forget about, but it's hard to ignore the numbers that he put together. And I think if he could develop his off-speed stuff, he's going to be a guy that can be in the professional ranks for a long time.
Oh, professional ranks for a long time indeed, with being how just absolutely dominant he was the entire season. He had 17 appearances, 13 starts. He had a save. He actually had a save in every season, except this was his first year of basically becoming a full-time starter. In 2023, he had a 4.12 ERA, but he had 19 appearances, 8 starts, and he had 88 strikeouts, 29 walks. And then in 2022, as a freshman, he had 18 appearances, no starts, 4.84 ERA, 19 walks to 35 strikeouts. So a guy that really had his first taste of being a full-time starter at the collegiate ranks. And while he took a ton of advantage with it, being able to throw what he did, having those amounts of strikeouts the way they did, I want to pull through his game logs and see, how impressive. Like his last 2 starts, again, postseason starts, he struck out a dozen batters against Caldwell on May 3rd, and then he struck out 10 batters against Jefferson on May 9th. So his last 2 starts, he had 10-plus strikeouts against better competition, again, in the postseason.
Yeah, and I think that competition piece is going to be obviously how is he going to adjust to going from a conference that wasn't as strong to now going and playing in the professional ranks. That'll be interesting to see. But his stuff is there and it's evident. And if you strike that many guys out, you're going to get noticed. And he did. Credit to him.
Credit to him as well. As we go to the 19th round, and there was 3 Division II picks in the 9th, or excuse me, not 3 picks from a Division II. 2 played at Division II this past season. 1 was at a Division II in the past. And we'll talk about here the Mets and pick 563 go with Frank Elisalt of Nova Southeastern.
Elisalt tops out at 94. Another guy that threw 51 innings this year, 3.70 ERA. Good velo on the fastball, good command on the mound from the right side. Pretty consistent with his mechanics and his delivery. When you look at what he can do, it's pretty simple. I like the way that he just has that quick step and then lifts the leg and fires. That's one thing I noticed watching him play. And you talk about the Sunshine State Conference, the numbers he was able to put together there is pretty cool. But I think teams look at that. Like, how is your delivery? And he just has a really smooth delivery. I think that with the smooth delivery, you can add a little bit to that fastball. Maybe not a ton, but I think he could still get some more out of it because he has that just quick step back and then lift up and go. And I think that's for the Sharks. He was really good as well when he utilized that method. So that is the selection that was picked up there for the New York Mets, who pick a couple of Division II guys during this draft.
Yeah. And what made it interesting is under first-year head coach Adrian Morales, Elisalt mostly pitched out of the bullpen because in 2023, he had 14 appearances, all starts, 67 innings, didn't perform as well as he liked. He had a 4.68 ERA. But then in this past season, he had 19 appearances and just 3 starts, had a 3.71 ERA, 62 strikeouts in 51 innings, and he had a couple saves. So he really performed well out of the bullpen, and a guy that was a multi-inning reliever because he averaged about 2 innings per relief appearance there as well for the Sharks. So maybe that difference helped him a lot and helped him down the road to ultimately be the 19th round draft pick of the New York Mets.
Indeed. And you want to talk about the Mets and what they did? Well, they made that selection for Cam Shelke, right-hander out of Mississippi.
Well, it does say Mets, but it should say Guardians.
Guardians. He played at Northwood in 2022. So how about Northwood?
Another guy, and a guy that Cam Schulte, you should know, is a guy that had that multiple delivery. He could throw from up here, he could throw from over the top, he could throw from the sidearm, he could throw submarine, and he did all three of it as he left Northwood to then transfer to the College of Central Florida, a well-known JUCO in Florida, in 2023, and then pitched well there to then pitch this past season at Mississippi State, where his numbers there, he had a 4.21 ERA in 32 appearances. He threw 47 innings. He had 47 strikeouts as well. And he went back to the Cape Cod. So he had 3 years in the Cape Cod League. And, his 2022, part of the reason why he potentially transfers, he had a 0.81 ERA in 22 and a third innings in the Cape Cod League. So really impressive there. At Northwood, he had a 4.98 ERA, 5-4, 19 appearances, 4 starts. He threw nearly 60 innings, as similar to what Jekelic and Carroll were this year at Northwood. Schulte was for Northwood in 2022.
Yeah, he was 3 years in the Cape as a pitcher.
3 years in the Cape as a pitcher.
That's pretty rare. Let's talk about another pitcher.
And our last one.
Yeah. Last guy, round 19 for the MLB draft. Pick 574 from the Miami Marlins. They select St. Leo right-hander Luke Lashutka, who from our end was one of the best pitchers in all of Division II baseball this year. Glad to see him get selected. Was curious if he would, and if he would not, what would he do? But Luke Lashutka, an All-American, 10-1 with a 2.88 ERA, worked over 100 innings this year. So would not be surprised if they kind of shut him down the rest of the year. A very, very polished arm, has some good stuff. I mean, that St. Leo staff had a lot of really good arms. And to see what he did with 10-1, and he struck out 102 guys and walked 11. I mean, dude's just an absolute dog. He went 14-1 in his career.
Yeah, and remember, we talked a lot about him in that first month because he didn't allow a run in his first couple of starts. And not only that, in his first 45 innings, he allowed just one run, not earned run. Crazy. And that was just beyond impressive what he was able to do this past season for St. Leo. And again, 102 strikeouts to just 11 walks, a guy that really, he had 2 walks in his third start, 3 walks in a start against Florida Southern, another 3 walks against Tampa. So if you take those 3 games out, he would just have 3 walks in 84 innings. Absolutely crazy to see. And so that makes it very interesting there. And holy cow, he performed at such a high level. He used to play at St. Bonaventure before transferring to St. Leo. So he spent some time there before transferring to St. Leo, playing the last 3 seasons there. And boy, did he only get better from there. He was used as, again, another guy, uses mostly a reliever. His first 2 seasons at St. Leo, he had 21 total appearances in 2022 and 2023, and just 4 starts in those 2 seasons before becoming a full-fledged starter. And what did he do? Well, he performed at a high level as the All-American. Again, 10-1 with a 2.88 ERA, over 100 innings, as that was the last Division II pick in the 2024 MLB draft. But that doesn't mean we can't talk about a couple known UDFA signings, undrafted free agents that have signed with pro organizations. And one that happened a ways back ago before the MLB draft was Anthony Nunez, the third baseman from Tampa. He signed with the New York Mets roughly, I would say, a week or 2 after winning their national championship. And what's interesting about Nunez was they're going to try to have him as a pitcher, because this past season he got into pitching. He was mostly our third baseman. He got into pitching and he topped out at 97 miles per hour. So think about that. So that's a
Yeah.
raw arm that the Mets could probably take advantage of there as well. And what's interesting about that is many teams may not know about this, but it's allowed. So Nunez, if you don't already know, he was actually an MLB draft pick in the past out of high school. And so what makes that interesting is this idea of if he was drafted, so he was drafted out of Miami Springs High School in the 29th round by the San Diego Padres. Ultimately didn't work out for him. He goes to Tampa in 2022, and he plays 3 years with Tampa, 2022, 2023, 2024. It is allowed that if a guy gets drafted out of high school and signs, then ultimately drops out, he can go to a Division II program and play college baseball. As that is allowed. So Anthony Nunez is an example of that there. It's now he's back in the Mets organization, but this time as a pitcher. So very, very interesting to see what he does. He's actually one of the few guys that does have information, as he's thrown 2 scoreless innings in the Mets rookie league. So very, very excited to see what happens there as time progresses. But yeah, he played third base most of his entire career at Tampa, but yet he just got on the mound this past season, and now he's back in pro ball as a full-time pitcher.
Yeah, couple innings already in appearances. Interesting little path that he had, being from Miami and then going to Tampa after being drafted back in what? He got drafted and then doesn't work out at the time and then goes back to Tampa, then gets picked up ultimately here
He
by
was
the
a
Mets.
29th
19?
round draft pick in 2019. So back when the draft was 40 rounds, he was a 29th rounder, signed, didn't pan out for him there, goes to Tampa, performs well, gets on the bump, scouts see it, and then he ultimately gets signed by the New York Mets. And again, this happened before the draft. So that being said, there's also 2 more. So one is a Millersville pitcher, and that's Zach Tukes, who was signed by the Phillies as an undrafted free agent. So he was mostly like a swingman, starter reliever. He could throw the ball very hard. Let me see if there's any information on how hard he actually did throw. But in terms of stats, he had a 3.86 ERA for Millersville this past season in 21 innings, 13 appearances, 5 starts. He had 32 strikeouts and 20 walks, and a guy that again threw the ball very hard. He was up to 95 miles per hour on the fastball. So let's see if I can switch over to that as well.
And he was a guy who went to that MLB draft league, which helped.
Yeah, so that plays a part of it too.
6'5".
6'5". Yeah, again, a projectable guy, as we have right here. So I will start sharing this tab. So a guy that, again, 6'5", throws up to 95, got a UDFA deal with the Philadelphia Phillies.
And then we have one more too, right?
And we have one last one, which a guy that we talked about, a bat that performed at a high level.
For a team that hit a lot of home runs.
Yeah. And if you haven't figured it out yet, well, you're about to, because at least on the video side, Max Holley, Central Missouri shortstop, was signed a UDFA deal with the Houston Astros.
And the Astros, of course, have some fondness for Central Missouri.
Central Missouri,
or at least their owner does.
The owner is a alumnus of Central Missouri, but And this past season with Central Missouri, I mean, what Max Holley did, he hit 365, slugged 659. He had 14 home runs. He drove in 75. Oh, and he also had 33 stolen bases, walked 41 times, struck out 42 times. Makes for a really impressive player there, and we'll see just how much he can do there in the Astros org, as he is another undrafted free agent signing out of the Division II ranks.
Yeah, he was a great player on what was a historically offensively driven team. A guy that you almost forgot about, like with Fran Bruce-Seguin and Heath and this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy, and then you had Holy, and man, he had an unbelievable season. Honestly, on pretty much any other team in the country, I mean, he'd be by far and away the best stats. It wouldn't even be close. But when he was on Central Missouri, it was like, man, they're putting up so many runs every single game, and he was a big part of that. And so glad to see him get an opportunity.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he was actually hitting at the bottom of the order. And think about how crazy that is. A guy with an OPS over 1,100, and yet he's at the bottom of the order. Crazy to think about, as pulling up their game logs from this past season and trying to see the stats there. But he was actually the 3-hole hitter against Angelo State in the World Series, so he might have bumped his way up, but still, nonetheless, being a 3-hole hitter in that offense is a pretty high reward. And the Astros obviously saw that and said, "Hey, we're going to take a chance on you."
Might as well
Indeed. But that will wrap up everything about the draft, the current UDFA. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, as well as like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on social, DIVII Baseball, across Twitter, Instagram, you name it.
Absolutely. Again, please share this show on YouTube, the YouTube link if you're watching there, or on Spotify. However you consume this podcast, share that link with your friends, whoever you think may be interested. And like Robert mentioned, subscribe on both of those channels so that you know when we drop shows, and you'll be the first to know. Of course, we'll put it out on our X. And if you're not following us there, man, we don't know what to tell you. You need to get on that right now. But we'll obviously post it there. But subscribe on the podcast channels itself as well, so you can continue to engage with us. And we thank you so much for tuning in. And we will talk to you guys soon.